a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Organic Man Coffee Trike has been making the best coffee in the universe since 2015. The sign says 2016 because that's when they moved from the three-wheeled bicycle into an actual building on Grant Street. We now have something like 20 coffee shops in Laredo. But why drink coffee that is not the best in the universe? If you think I'm lying, prove it. Swing by 4501 McPherson and pick up a cup of the best coffee in the universe and see if I know my coffee. Julio doesn't just make the best coffee, he roasts it right there in the back room, which is actually to the left of the counter. If you're not in Laredo or you hate driving, you can get the best coffee by going to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. If Moses had a good cup of coffee, they wouldn't have wandered in the desert for so long. I used to run a lot, not just chasing people. I used to run marathons. My dentist would say, "Is it safe?" If you don't get that one, you haven't seen the movie The Marathon Man. Over the years and miles, I seem to have worn out parts of my body. Running is no longer my thing. I've ridden a bike forever as well. I was on the bike patrol twice. It's a cool way to make a living until it gets up over 100 degrees, and the only AC is when you're going downhill and the traffic is light. Today, my exercise is my bike. I ride the parks so my wife doesn't worry about me getting run over again. I really don't want to become a hood ornament a third time, and our streets aren't all that bike friendly. I asked one clown why he knocked me off my bike. He said he saw me, but he didn't think he had to stop. He was in a vehicle. I was on a bike. He was rushing to get into Buffalo Wild Wings, and he figured I needed to get out of his way, even though I was in the middle of the driveway at the time. Ooh, that did not feel good. The parks have bike and running trails that are great until you get behind a gaggle of walkers who are so wrapped up in their little group, they don't realize there are others trying to use the same paths. I tell them I'm trying to pass, and it almost always startles them to see some guy on a bike in the bike lane. On the ground are little white bicycle emblems every so often, but they don't seem to notice them. I do my best to be polite, uh, no matter how these walkers act. Sometimes it's all I can do not to do something. I tend to look at folks going in the opposite direction to see if just maybe I know them. I wear dark wraparound sunglasses with inserts so I can focus on my odometer. I can see clearly at 30 feet and at 3 feet, but everything in between is a bit blurry. I'm sure they make progressive bike glasses, but I'm trying to not spend all my money all the time. Dave Ramsey says, act your wage. This all leads up to me looking at people going the other direction as I'm cruising along. And I've noticed odd things from a lot of people. Runners who are really into it will focus on the ground a few feet in front of themselves. I know how this works since I ran when I was able. You are putting one foot in front of the other and you're concentrating on how your foot falls. There's a lot more to running than just moving fast. Some runners act as if they're better than everybody else on the trail. I think this is a sign of just how small they actually are. They act like a big shot so that everybody thinks they're a big shot. These are the same folks that are abusive to the wait staff at restaurants, and they complain about things that they're not willing to do something about. I often wonder if I don't pull to the side and I let them go by, will they run right up onto the handlebars? Some of these people are so determined to own the trail that they just might be willing to hurt themselves to prove it. It's a big world, and I'm not here to pretend like I own any of it. Some walkers will stay on the bike side of the path. They usually have their cell phone in front of their face and they're oblivious to what is coming up on them. These folks will walk right out in front of traffic, and the drivers are expected to watch out for them. Once they realize there are people on bicycles coming at them, they have a look on their face of disbelief. Sometimes this is followed by anger at having to climb out of their heads and respond to others. Some get confused and they don't know what to do. They jump over onto the grass or they run back onto the foot traffic lane, sometimes winding up right in the path of some elite athlete who is running along and not looking where they're going. I consider it my duty to not run anyone over, no matter where they're walking or how slow they are going. These sudden movements can lead to me having to slow way down or in order to respond to other people's actions. If you're one of these folks that's going to jump from one foot to the other and back and forth across the trail, how am I supposed to know where to aim my front tire? My priorities are dogs, followed by children, and then everybody else. If you're a dog walker, you'll understand that. The people that get my attention the most are the ones who avoid eye contact. They will steal a quick glance in my direction and then they look away. I know they see me, yet they are trying to not acknowledge my presence. Some have a blank look on their faces, while a few almost look afraid. I'm just some guy on a bike, and I tend to smile when I'm riding. I'm enjoying most of it. Not the steep hills and the headwind, but most of the ride is as close to heaven as I can get without a cup of coffee in my hand. Way back when I worked at the fire station, I started riding my bike to work. I lived just east of Johnson Space Center, and the station was a few miles to the north. I started to ride to work, and I would stop at the convenience store to grab a cup of coffee. It didn't take long to realize that I cannot ride a bike and drink coffee at the same time. Most of the coffee would wind up running down the front of my shirt. So then I decided I've either got to put some ice cubes in the coffee and drink it before I ride, or I had to wait till I got to the station. When I'm riding, I wave at any kids, especially if they're on bikes. I wave at anybody who looks at me and sees me. Most will smile, but once in a while I'll see that quick head turn and that empty look in the eyes. In his Sermon on the Mount, Christ taught his disciples, the eye is the light of the soul. William Shakespeare said the eye is the window to the soul. The eyes will show you how a person is feeling or even what they might be thinking. You can learn a lot by looking somebody right in the eye and listening to what they're saying. This works very well when asking a person if they're a United States citizen or not. Citizens will look you right back in the eye and say, yes, they're citizens. Aliens will look around as if trying to figure out what the answer might be. They'll look to the left, to the right, they'll look up, they'll look down, and then they'll try and mumble something, and, well, you can usually figure it out pretty quick. Police use this method all the time to establish whether a suspect is telling the truth or not. Of course, there are some folks who can look you right in the eye and lie to you. Now, we call these folks politicians. Making eye contact is a powerful tool that can be used to communicate emotions, understanding, and even messages without speaking. People's perception of another is often based on the amount of eye contact that they make. People with social anxiety problems, and they find themselves in a social setting, making eye contact can cause extreme discomfort and even fear. They may be avoiding eye contact to help protect themselves from the potential feelings of awkwardness or vulnerability. They seem to know by looking somebody in the eye is opening up their own emotions and fears. Sometimes people avoid eye contact simply because they don't care about the conversation or are feeling bored by what is being said. Anytime I'm asked about what I do now that I'm retired, the conversation is going to go to UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, and conspiracies. I do see a lot of wide eyed responses from people who will ask if I really believe in all those things. A few will suddenly realize they have pressing engagements elsewhere. Don't ask if you don't want to know. There are folks who will not look you in the eye because things coming out of their mouths is not true. I do get this once in a while when people are telling me about a sighting of some strange thing or other. They'll be going on about seeing something while their eyes are going around the room as if they're looking for the truth that is not theirs. I do look around the room while speaking. This is because I'm kind of paranoid. I'm looking for things other folks ignore. The guy with the hockey mask and the chainsaw. The shadow being slipping around unnoticed. A pile of money dropped by some generous rich guy. It's amazing how many people will walk around seeing only what is on the screen of their phone. If I do spot a guy with a hockey mask and a chainsaw, consider yourself lucky because I will let you know they're there. Avoiding eye contact may be a sign of fear of intimidation. If somebody is in a confrontational or a threatening situation, they may avoid eye contact to avoid escalating the situation or appearing confrontational. There are folks out there looking for a fight. They have a huge chip on their shoulder and they want somebody to try knocking it off so they can prove how manly they are, usually to themselves. Most people don't look at somebody that fights a lot as being very manly. They look at them as being somewhat of an ox. When doing jail shakedowns, a lot of the prisoners would try to test us by staring us in the eye. We all knew what was going on, and the guys locked up never won. My brother was a prison guard, and he said he ran into that all the time. I'm at that point in life, if somebody does want to fight, I am not a good choice. If I win, well, they just got beat up by an old guy. If they win, well, big deal. They just beat up some old guy. Nothing to brag about there. Plus, I tend to fight dirty. Like Nathan Bedford Forrest said, get there the first with the most. Some folks may not make eye contact because they have a cognitive or a physical impairment. Every year, the boys in the white lab coats come out with new and exciting mental illnesses and syndromes. There's HDAD, that's high definition attention disorder. The inability to pay attention, but they do it with great concentration. Yes, I got that one from Stephen Wright. Here in Laredo, we have more than our share of folks whose merry-go-round has lost a few horses. They wander the streets looking for that missing something. I mentioned a few on my show, The Colorful People of Laredo, back in May. The Ultimate Warrior never made eye contact. Some folks are so busy working on things going on inside their minds that they don't pay attention to things going around their bodies. They call this success. I call it missing out on life. I've known people that have forgotten their kids' birthdays because they were too busy. They're chasing that all important buck while their families wind up living without them. The mental gymnastics needed to manage their jobs take over their lives, and anything not involved in chasing those greenbacks gets thrown to the gutter. The family should be happy knowing that their parents are making huge piles of cash so they can buy new electronic gadgets and live their lives on a screen. Virtual reality has taken over for reality. People who have had bad things in their lives might avoid looking around in order to avoid seeing anything that might touch off a bad memory. You can take in a lot of emotions through the eyes, and these may be painful. The thing to do is work out your problems and then try to rejoin the world. This may sound like just words from somebody with no problems, but my old man used to say, if all the problems in the world were hung from a tree, we would all pick our own. And I have picked my own problems. Why do some folks share every little detail of their lives? I see messages all the time where somebody I know is having a problem with a spouse or a sibling or a significant other or somebody at work. Just maybe they should hold some of those cards a little closer to their vest. You'd be amazed at what information harvesters can learn about some people simply by looking on the internet. All those posts that people have made over the years, how many are going to come back and haunt them someday? I know a few things about some really good friends of mine that I wished I didn't. What has been seen, eye contact, can be interpreted differently depending on which culture somebody is from. In some cultures, looking in someone's eyes is considered to be intimidating or rude. Malaysians value humility and modesty in their interactions. Extended eye contact is interpreted as impolite or invasive, potentially making individuals quite uncomfortable. In China, people make eye contact when they're angry. It's meant to challenge the other person, and it's considered a sign of disrespect. People will make eye contact, prolonged eye contact, when they're on the defensive or they're trying to engage in a fight. In Japan, it's a sign of respect to not make eye contact with other people. Making eye contact with another person during conversation is considered rude. The Japanese tend to keep to themselves, so making open eye contact with a random stranger is considered a violation of personal space. Invasion of personal space through the eyes. I find this interesting. What kind of interaction might be taking place? Maybe your mind is touching theirs. Your thoughts are mixing together. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting concept, though. In Vietnam, eye contact is a way of showing interest in the opposite sex. If somebody of the same sex makes eye contact, they may be looking for a fight. There seem to be a lot of Asian countries where eye contact is rude or hostile. In Egypt, eye contact is seen as a sign of interest, honesty, and sincerity, especially when men are doing business. While people from Western countries tend to consider prolonged eye contact uncomfortable, they are common in Egypt, and it's a good sign if you're doing business with someone. In Greece, maintaining eye contact constantly through a conversation shows genuine attention, honesty, and sincerity. In France, respect is shown through direct, unbroken eye contact. Fijians tend to hold intense eye contact while they are talking. Avoiding eye contact has been associated with power dynamics. When a person feels superior to you and they avoid looking at you, it's a silent power play. It can be used to make somebody feel lower in status or simply as a way to maintain distance. These super athletes that run without seeing those around them, they're making a power statement. Maybe I should just let them run up on my handlebars and see what happens. How's your power statement now there? Well, avoiding eye contact is seen as a sign of low self esteem in most Western countries. People with low self confidence often feel like they're not worth looking at, so they try to make themselves invisible, like the invisible boy in The Mystery Men. Some people may feel vulnerable when they are open and connected with someone. They avoid eye contact as a form of self protection. It's like a barrier between them and other people. Some will say familiarity breeds contempt. You get to know somebody too well, you learn all their quirks and their idiosyncrasies. You may discover the other person is weird. They believe in flying saucers and ghosts and things like that. And wait, that would be me, the guy that stares at other people. Anger can be another reason a person might avoid eye contact. A person may not want to look somebody in the eye because they're feeling anger or they fear that their anger will show. Hostile eyes. I've seen them. This is when a good ability to be tactful comes in handy. You can diffuse a situation or make it worse simply by saying and doing the wrong thing at the right time. Rolling on the ground and acting like a couple of male cats can be painful and it can get you thrown out of places like the dentist's office or a museum or the coffee shop. In 2015, a psychologist in Italy came up with a way to induce a drug free altered state of consciousness. He asked 20 volunteers to sit and stare in each other's eyes for 10 minutes straight. During the 10 minutes, people began to experience out of body activity. They also began to see hallucinations, monsters, sometimes their relatives. Sometimes their relatives are monsters. They would see themselves in their co-gazer's face. Giovanni Caputo from the University of Urbino had 20 young adults, mostly women. I don't know why, but it was mostly women who were told to sit there and stare at each other in the eye. They were split into pairs. They sat in a dimly lit room. It was just dim enough that they could make out the other person's face, but they couldn't see any real details. And they did this for 10 minutes. The light in the room was bright enough that the volunteers could make out facial features. The control group of 20 other volunteers were asked to sit and stare for 10 minutes in another dimly lit room. They were also split into pairs, but their chairs were all facing a blank wall. The volunteers were not told what the purpose of the study was, only it had to do with meditative experience with their eyes open. After the 10 minutes were up, the volunteers were asked to complete questionnaires relating to what they experienced during and after the experiment. Some questionnaires focused on an dissociative symptoms of the volunteers that they may have had while participating in the staring contest. Well, not an actual staring contest. They were allowed to blink, just not look away. Another set of questions was on what they perceived in their partner's eyes or their own face if they were looking at the wall. Disassociation is a term used in psychology to describe a whole range of psychological experiences that make a person feel detached from their immediate surroundings. Symptoms such as a loss of memory, is seeing everything in distorted colors, or feeling like the world isn't real can be brought on by abuse, trauma, drugs, and now face staring. The participants in the eye to eye group said they'd had a compelling experience unlike anything they felt before. Caputo said the eye to eye group outscored the wall group in all questionnaires, which suggests that something about staring into another human's eyes for 10 minutes had a profound effect on their visual perception and their mental state. On the dissociative state test, states, yeah, dissociative states test, they gave the strongest ratings to items relating to reduced color intensity, sounds seeming quieter or louder than expected, becoming spaced out, and time seemed to drag on. 90% of the eye to eye group said they'd seen some deformed facial traits. 75% they'd seen a monster. 50% said they saw aspects of their own face in their partner's face, and 15% said they'd seen a relative's face. Caputo had conducted a similar experiment in 2010. He had 50 volunteers staring at themselves in a mirror for 10 minutes. The volunteers stated seeing what Caputo described as the strange face illusion. The folks doing the staring saw their own face changing into someone else that they knew and sometimes that they didn't know. The participants described huge deformations of their own faces, seeing the faces of living or deceased relatives, archetypical faces such as old women, old men, children, uh, ancestors that they may have seen in a photo album, animal faces, cats, pigs, lions, even monstrous beings. All 50 participants reported feeling of not being themselves. Their bodies and minds felt as if they were drifting away. They were no longer themselves. Naturally, I had to try this myself. I stared into my own eyes, and after a short period of time, I thought I was looking at my dad's face. Well, this isn't all that strange because I look just like he did when he was 60. This was around the first minute of staring into my own eyes. After a few more minutes, my face began to get super wrinkled, like a Shar Pei. My cheeks were hanging down, my eyes were covered by a flap of skin that used to be my forehead. I noticed my mouth was getting wider. Eventually, the corners of the mouth were all the way around to the sides of my jaw. I kind of could see why a person might think that they were seeing a monster. At around 8 or 9 minute mark, colors began to get very bright. It made my eyes hurt, or maybe this was just from me staring at the same spot too long, but it really made my eyes think it was too bright in the bathroom. Uh, it felt weird as well, like I was drifting along, being blown by a breeze. The room was slowly getting quieter as I stood there. It felt like I was no longer there, maybe no longer myself. You can try this on your own. It might surprise you how you're going to feel and what you're going to see. I can't report any long term, as in minutes, lasting effects. I used a timer, so I knew when it was time to quit. I wouldn't recommend doing this for more than 10 minutes. I don't know how that might affect a person, good, bad, or otherwise. Maybe you'll find yourself on the other side of the mirror. As I was standing there figuring it had to have been time to stop, the surrounding view of the room began to fade away. It was like the room around me was blurred to a point of nothingness. This is known as the Troxler effect, which refers to how peripheral images fade away when you fix your gaze on a particular point. Is there power in the eyes? The concept of the evil eye has been around for thousands of years. It's based on the idea that somebody has put a spell or a curse on you by looking into your eyes and thinking bad thoughts. Many countries and cultures believe in the evil eye throughout Europe, North and East Africa, the Middle East, the Philippines, and Latin America. Gypsies are often associated with the evil eye. Back in 1990, there was a group of travelers, as they call themselves today, from Chicago, and they were running around Laredo. They were doing some not very nice things, and several of them wound up getting arrested by us when they admitted to being in the country illegally. They were all from Eastern Europe. They all acted suspicious, and we went through trying to figure out why. Questioning was a non starter. Oh, they answered all of our questions, but with several different answers. One guy I was questioning said that he was born in France, Germany, Italy, Belgium, and Hungary. In short, he changed his story every time I asked him the question. Back then, it was allowed to smoke in the building. These folks smoked. They went through several cartons of cigarettes while in custody. There was one individual that we referred to as the old woman because, well, she looked like she was in her 70s. I wound up having to go through her purse, and I found she had 5 driver's licenses, each in a different name and a different address. They all stated she was born in 1960. She was 2 years younger than I was, but boy, did she look rough. After listening to these people talking back and forth in some unknown language, one of our senior agents, who had been a cop in Washington state, said these folks are gypsies. He said they would climb a tree to lie rather than stand on the ground to tell the truth. That's what Nick said. I'm not making that up. We had this one agent, uh, not the sharpest knife in the drawer, shall I say? Well, he managed to insult the youngest female in the group. I don't know what he said, but knowing him, he may have propositioned her. I don't know. But she stood in the corner looking at him. She would pull down her lower eyelid with one finger. She would mumble something in that weird language they were speaking, and then she would point at him and then mumble something else in this weird language. And she did this for about an hour. Just so happens the next week somebody stole the guy's car and his hair all fell out. He was completely bald within a year. I don't know if this was a gypsy curse. Would a gypsy put a curse like that on a person? Yes, I read the book Thinner, but is that a good curse? All your hair is going to fall out and somebody's going to steal your car. I don't know. It just doesn't have any oomph to it. Archaeologists have found evil eye amulets dating back to 3300 BC in Mesopotamia, which is today Syria. The evil eye is believed that it's a belief that the eye can cause harm with a glance holding a bad intention. The evil eye can be placed on a person for jealousy, Greed, anger, blame, resentment, hostility, contempt, malice, ill will, or even just an awareness of inequality, leaving harm and destructiveness in its wake. Evil eye amulets are often blue in the shape of an eye, and they are known as a nazar, which translates from Arabic as sight and attention. People who are affiliated with the evil eye experience a sudden, inexplicable ailment, maybe hair loss. Some people believe the evil eye can cause physical and mental health problems, such as headaches and anxiety. The belief is that the negative energy is so strong that it can disrupt a person's well being. The Greek philosopher Plutarch suggested a scientific explanation for the evil eye. He said the human eye had the power of releasing invisible rays of energy that were in some cases potent enough to kill children and small animals. Plutarch said certain people possessed an even stronger ability to weld this power, citing groups of people from south of the Black Sea as being uncannily proficient in bestowing the curse. Those said to be the most adept at delivering the curse have blue eyes. I don't think I've ever cursed anyone. I'm pretty sure. But anybody was capable of doing it. It's just those of us with blue eyes were really good at it. Like I said, I have never tried. I don't know if it's true or not. I often wonder, is that why the evil eye amulets were blue? In Mexico, they have the mal de ojo. It's not so much a curse thrown on people as an accidental delivery of bad energy. If somebody has a brand new knee biter and you go over and you say, "Oh, how cute," you must immediately place your hand on the kid to reabsorb any bad energy that you may have inadvertently passed on. Some folks will tell you to be sure and touch the child before you stroll away. If you're at the zoo or you're just walking down the street and you happen upon a gorilla, do not stare them in their eye. This is how they decide who they're going to fight. If you stare at a gorilla, it will decide that you are the enemy and then it will do something about it. Direct eye contact can trigger a silverback to charge and fight you in defense of his family. If you are not as strong as a gorilla, and I'm sure you're not, do not stare a gorilla in the eyes. You will wind up as a greasy smear on the sidewalk. In many legends about otherworldly creatures, we're told to not look them in the eye. Do not look a skinwalker in the eye. That's how they will be absorbed into your mind, and then they can control you from inside. One of the key traits of psychopaths is a lack of emotion or callousness. It would stand to reason emotional pupillary response would look different in a psychopath. Researchers at Cardiff and Swansea University tested this theory. They measured the pupillary response of psychopaths and non-psychopath offenders. All offenders were shown disturbing images of I'm not going to say it. I wanted to, but I'm not going to. Anyway, they were shown they were shown disturbing images like dogs that were in a threatening manner, vicious dogs with their teeth bared, sometimes mutilated bodies, corpses, people from vehicle accidents, just things most people don't want to look at. Following these images, they were shown positive photographs, such as puppies and kittens and people laughing. Non-psychopath offenders showed pupillary response to both positive and negative stimuli. This indicates activity in emotional region of the brain. Psychopath had no pupillary response to any negative images. However, they did show pupillary response when exposed to positive images. This suggests that psychopaths may not have an overall immunity to emotions, they have a specific insensitivity to disturbing stimuli. In the movie M with Peter Lorre, the killer is seen buying raw meat for a street dog, after which he goes and he kills someone. Did Fritz Lang know something about psychopaths, or was he just guessing? When Anthony Hopkins was studying up for his role as Hannibal Lecter, he studied psychopaths. He looked into how they behaved when talking to people and how they changed once the room was no longer under observation, as far as they knew. He found out that some psychopaths didn't blink as often as the rest of us. Research shows that when people are nervous or troubled, they blink a lot. This got Hopkins to force himself to look at Clarisse, Jodie Foster, while limiting the number of times he blinked. If you watch the movie Silence of the Lambs, you won't be aware of what's wrong with Hannibal Lecter when he's looking at Jodie Foster, but you'll know that there is something wrong. Something is going to affect you emotionally, but you won't be able to put your finger on it. You find yourself believing that Hopkins is crazy. If you were to meet him on the street, you'd probably run away. I went to see the movie Bram Stoker's Dracula when it came out, and I didn't like it. Why? Hopkins wasn't acting the way I expected him to. I was expecting to see Hannibal Lecter again, but instead it was Abraham Van Helsing, and it was just too much of a change. What is going on in a person's eyes that project such emotions, thoughts, ideas that are going on inside other people's heads? You can look a politician smiling and see that it doesn't reach the eyes. You can look into a person's eyes you have never met and get an understanding of how that person functions. Have you ever met somebody and immediately decided that they were somebody you wanted to, maybe you needed to hang out with? Now, then again, you meet folks once in a while that you are uncomfortable with. You can't say what they did or what they're doing that makes you want to distance yourself from them. It's something in the eyes. There are three types of cones in your eyes: red, green, and blue. Each type responds to a different wavelength of light. Long wavelengths stimulate red cones. Short wavelengths stimulate blue cones. Medium wavelengths stimulate green cones. When different combinations of cones are activated, you see the world in different colors. We aren't actually seeing anything. Waves are entering your body by way of the eyeballs. It passes along the optic nerve into the brain, which sorts out all these waves and turns them into a picture of what's in front of us. All those colors are just different wiggly things. You're not really seeing things. You're simply having it projected into your brain through your eyes. We don't see with our eyes, but with our brains. I am positive that there's some guy in a white lab coat out there somewhere working on building a new computer projector that can send images into our minds. Once this happens, how will we know what is actually in front of our faces and what is just being shoved into our brains by some government agent? Ah, but they're already doing this. The reason is that blind people will be able to see once images are able to be projected into the brain. Don't get all riled up. The military would never turn this into a weapon. That would be wrong. It's not just on my bike. I have the same experience in the grocery store. I walk the aisles and I look folks in the eye as we pass. Most older folks will look back and they'll usually smile or they'll just nod like they know I'm there and I know they're there. The younger ones are the ones that tend to focus on some image that only they can see. They look to the side of the aisle, they'll look down, they'll look away from me as if I'm not there. Don't know why. It's gotten to a point where it's kind of a game for me. See who will look back and who will not. Now, speaking of eyes, people are actually attracted to unusual things. Things like the world's biggest or the world's smallest, or people with distinct, unusual things like maybe different colored eyes. In the spring of 1962, David got sideways with his best friend George after convincing George's girlfriend that she should go out with David instead. She did, and George found out. The next day, George walked up to David and punched him right in the eye. David fell like a sack of wet cement. At the hospital, doctors discovered that David had received damage to the nerves that controlled his eye. Several operations were conducted, but the left eye was permanently dilated. George was shunned by everybody at school, and he felt a bit bad about punching his best friend over a girl. Life goes on, and the two eventually got back together. They formed a band, and they tried to become rich and famous. David played the saxophone, and George sang. The crowds grew as they performed, but nobody was there to listen to the music. They were there to stare at David's eyes. David had blue eyes, but now one was permanently dilated, making it look black. A saxophone player with two different colored eyes was drawing folks to the show, not their music. Eventually, George went on to do other things, but David began to sing, and he formed his own group. He went from a schoolboy who could play the saxophone to a worldwide phenomenon. Everybody knew his name. The girls went wild any time he was on stage. Money for Nothing and the Chicks, oh no, that's a different group. David not only forgave George for punching him in the eye, but he said it was because of that well-aimed punch that David became famous. In 1962, George Underwood had punched David Bowie right in the eye. His left eye looked permanently black from then on, and thousands of people went to hear him sing and to stare at his eyes. One day at work, I was called to the processing room. Well, actually, this happened a lot, but I was called to the processing room. And I walked in, and as I was told, there was a patient in the back corner cell, and I needed to look at him right away. I walked over to the cell, and I discovered the door was locked, and there was an agent guarding it. I asked what was up, and I was told this guy has some kind of a weird disease or something. Now, the patient was dressed in one of those Tyvek suits. He had on a face mask, goggles, and gloves. They had put all this on the patient to protect everybody from whatever it was he had. He looked like he was about to do surgery or clean out a house full of asbestos or something. I looked at his eyes, and the sclera in both eyes was red, all red, bright red. It looked kind of like Christopher Lee when he was playing Dracula. I asked the guy what had happened, and he said that he'd been in a fight and he'd been knocked unconscious, and when he woke up, that's how his eyes looked. I told him he could take off all the hazmat gear, and I left the door open. Everybody in the room had thought because the eyes were so red, he simply had to have some kind of a nasty, horrible, communicable disease. Instead of sending him to the hospital, they were isolating him. I sent him to the hospital to get his head examined. Literally. I think this guy needs brain x-rays. He turned out to be okay, just some really bad facial injuries. One of our agents was allergic to mesquite pollen. Just what you need while working in South Texas. His eyes would do weird things. The sclera would swell and it would bulge out. It looked horrible. It looked creepy as all get out. It looked, the pupils looked tiny because the white was all swollen up over the top of it. It was hard for him to close his eyes also. And he said it itched like mad. I tried flushing his eyes out with some saline and I gave him some Benadryl. I told him he should go see his doctor and get something to keep that from happening. I'd never seen anything like it. It looked real creepy because you don't expect that from somebody's eyeballs. Eye injuries can make a strong man feel weak. I've had a few eye injuries. I'm not a strong man, but boy, did that hurt. It ruined my day. It ruined my week. Oh, it was actually at night, so it didn't ruin my day, but I hate eye injuries. There's something called psychopath eyes. The thing to look for is dead, flat, or reptilian-like eyes. Very dark irises, or eyes that appear black. The pupils that don't dilate. Now, David Bowie had an excuse for his weird eye. Psychopath eyes go along with the expression such as a smile that doesn't reach the eyes or a soulless stare. This last one should not be mistaken for the 1,000-mile stare that you'll find in soldiers coming back from battle. In Japan, they have something known as sanpaku, which means three whites. If you look at your own eye in the mirror, you'll see white area on either side of the eye, the iris. If you also see white above or below the iris, your eyes are considered sanpaku. They have three whites. Sanpaku is divided into two subtypes. Yin sanpaku refers to the white below the iris. Traditionally, yin sanpaku suggests you may face some type of threat or danger from the world, or that you have a tendency to express yourself to risks or dangers. Expose, not express. Thrill seekers are supposed to have this kind of eye. Yang sanpaku refers to the white above the iris. It's said to suggest that you face threats from within. You're more likely to have a hard time managing your emotions, which could negatively affect both your behavior and your overall well-being. I hope you're sitting down for this next one. Non-criminals, the folks that we refer to as nice folks, look nice. Criminals almost always look like criminals. I'm not talking about phrenology. Phrenology was a much lauded scientific method of finding criminals based on the bumps on their skulls. It was believed the brain was composed of different muscles. Those used the most would become bigger, resulting in different skull shapes. Your brain was poking its way up through the skull. It was believed that the brain was literally causing the skull to be misshapen, and that's how you could identify a criminal. If you read a lot of old detective stories, you'll come across phrenology in a lot of these books. Scientists wrote up in the Journal of Social, Evolutionary, and Cultural Psychology tests that showed that people could pick out criminals by looking at photographs that showed their faces, which included their eyes. The eyes have it. In their experiment, volunteers were shown pictures of faces of 32 young Caucasian men in their 20s without scars, tattoos, or excessive facial hair, all in neutral expressions. 16 of these men were convicted criminals, and the other 16 were not. The test subjects were asked to write down how likely they thought each man was a criminal. The results from 2 experiments consistently showed individuals could tell who a criminal was and who was not. I wonder why this never works during elections. The criminals all had a look in their eyes that said that they tended to disobey the law, even in photographs. What is going on between a person's eyes and our brains? How can so much information be passed from one to another in a millisecond, just through the eyes? This may be why so many folks shy away from me when I'm wearing those dark glasses. If I don't use dark glasses in the daytime, I just about cannot see at night. Now, I don't wear sunglasses while I'm in the grocery store. That would be weird. So, this doesn't add up. Maybe some folks just don't want to have any kind of interaction with others, and so they bury their eyes where minds cannot get to them. Is it a good idea to avoid eye contact now that you know this just might keep you away from the criminals? The next time some psychopath is out trolling for his next victim, wouldn't you like a heads up? The weird thing about eye contact in criminals, the women in the test were never able to recognize rapists by their eyes. All the men did, but the women didn't. Jeepers creepers, where'd you get those? Well, from now on, try to make eye contact at least for a few seconds before looking away. It just might save your life or maybe just your wallet. I tried to find any references to eye contact on Vic Hermanson's amazing list of subjects. I didn't, but I only spent a few minutes looking. Annabelle Lee will probably let me know if there is a subject that has to do with eye contact next time on Trailer Trash Terrors, which, if you haven't listened yet, you really should consider giving it a go. Or try listening to Paranormal Rundown. Now, that's what the list pertains to. This also got me to wondering about drawings. Do drawings of criminals still project the same information? I'm going to have to look into this one, but not too sure how I'm going to do it. Don't forget, August 17th, I'll be at the Texas UFO Con in Jefferson, Texas. I have to somehow compete or survive being on stage with Daniel Jones and Daryl Sims. Hopefully, I'll be on before them so that nobody will compare me to what they have to say. I'll be present, but not spectacular. If you go on before folks like that, everybody forgets what you said because they're paying attention to what these folks say. If you go on after them, people are like, ugh, that guy should not be up there. It's not going to be like listening to the show, I hope. But anyway, yes, I will be on stage at Jefferson. And if you can be there, great. If not, I'll see if maybe Daniel can somehow put a copy of the video out on his page and maybe transfer it to mine. He does that sort of thing. Anyway, if you'd like to support the show, which would be really great, you can find my books at Amazon.com. Look for the Laredo Paranormal Research Society. That was my first nonfiction book. Fort McIntosh and the Paranormal, which was my second book, the one I swore I'd never write. Uh, Paranormal Laredo, which is simply stories from in and around Laredo about strange things that people have seen and experienced, followed by Paranormal Stories, which a lot of them were stories sent to me by my listeners from all over the planet, but still a lot of them are from Laredo. Recently, I put out a book called UFOs. I took all the UFO sightings and reports that I had in my first four books, put them together in one volume. Since I'll be at the UFO conference in Jefferson, there are some people that they're into UFOs, but they don't want to hear any of that Bigfoot ghost UFO, that nonsense. So I thought, well, let me just put all the UFO stuff in one book. And so if you want a copy, you can find it at Amazon.com. Or if you show up at the conference, you can get me to sign it for you. Till next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.